again. And, over the first couple of weeks, it was like, all right, can anybody even beat Georgia? And again, boy, how we forget just what college football does to us. Now, Texas also, how serious was the injury to Quinn Ewers? They had no problem with UTSA with their backup Golden Boy Arch Manning, but all of a sudden, Texas might have some injury issues. So here we go again with college football, and is Oregon now with a 49-14 win over Oregon State? Are they back? Are they back in the mix? And, well, we talked about it last week with regard to the now 3 Pac-12 schools in Oregon State, Colorado State, and Washington State, all having huge opportunities in front of them. On top of that, San Diego State with a game against Cal. It was the Cougs. It was the Cougs that came up big, winning the Apple Cup at Lumen Field and striking one for the new rebuilt Pac-12 in a huge win up there in Seattle. So we may dive into that and kind of the significance of that particular game. Colorado does what Colorado does, which is played fairly well on the field. And then, of course, the head coach's kid has to do something off the field or without football that we all talk about. I'm going to try my best to avoid the Colorado Buffaloes until they become an actual relevant football team, because I've said my piece with that. So we can dive into that. Also, for Oregon fans out there, the idea of style points needs to go away. I saw some Oregon fans on the X app, and Oregon ultimately did pull away. It was 49-14. There was never a doubt in the game, especially in the second half, because Oregon State couldn't move the ball in the second half against Oregon's defenses. But you start hearing, like, what do you need? Does Oregon need more style points here? It's like, when are we going to fix our brains? And the answer is, well, not this week. Style points don't matter anymore. They matter in the polls. Sure. They matter in maybe getting you in the discussion nationally, but in terms of getting to the ultimate prize and getting to the ultimate goal, it doesn't matter anymore. The fact that Oregon skated through the first 2 weeks and didn't have the disastrous loss is best case scenario at this point, because you're going to be favored against UCLA in 2 weeks. You're going to be favored at home on a Friday night against Michigan State, and you're likely going to be undefeated with the biggest opportunity in front of you with Ohio State, and it's all right there. Your 2 toughest games after that are going to be at Wisconsin and at Michigan. Don't know if you saw what Alabama did to Wisconsin this weekend, and Michigan seems fairly good, not great. So the idea for Oregon fans that are worried about style points and rankings and are they a top 10, none of this matters. The thing for Oregon that mattered the most was you saw finally that potential. You saw finally that firepower that everybody talked about throughout the summer show up in a big way at Reser Stadium. So we're going to dive into that coming up next. Is Oregon back? Where's Oregon State go from here? Is there worry in Corvallis? And a lot more to dive into on an interesting Civil War September afternoon down in Reser Stadium. That's next, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, it was 49-14 was your final when all was said and done at Reser Stadium on Saturday.
Brutal last quarter.
It was pretty bad.
Your boy was writing his loss story before the third quarter was over, and making plans for how quickly he could get out of the stadium. So yeah, it was bad.
Probably got out fairly quickly because a lot of people got out probably well before that final 000 hit up there on the Reser Stadium scoreboard. I think a lot of people had made their way to either I-5 or 99, whichever way you wanted to get back home.
We hit the road by 6, so I called that a win.
But it was a tale of two teams. It was a tale of two halves, and it was a tale of two eras. And by the way, our good friend Tyson Alger, if you have not went to the I-5 corridor to read his story, his play-by-play of what the new normal in this rivalry, and how long will this rivalry last? We're going to dive into that coming up in just a bit because, again, our resident Beaver believer has got some thoughts on that. More on that, though, coming up in a bit. Let's start.
There's also some great takes at Beaver's Edge as well on that game.
There you go, as well. Let's start with Oregon. For 2 weeks, Oregon fans were saying, whoa, what is this? What is this? And there were things being said like, they're just holding back. They're just holding back against Idaho. No sense in showing everything you got against Idaho. And then there were some even more ridiculous takes of, well, maybe Idaho's pretty good. Now, by the way, Idaho has beaten Wyoming and I think blew out another FCS team. Idaho might be pretty good this year. Not saying they're going to win the Big Sky, but that guy, Eck.
They beat Albany.
But they crushed him, right? In like 41-0.
41-13.
Eck's going to get himself a job somewhere.
He should.
He's going to get himself a job. But there were some ridiculous takes from Oregon fans after that Idaho game of, is Idaho? It's like it should not matter at all in any way, shape, or form. You want to compete for a college football playoff spot. I'm sorry you can't be in a one-possession ball game with Idaho at home on opening weekend. So then we fast forward. It's like, is this going to be the bounce-back game against Boise? Genty's coming in. Obviously, he's a legit back. He scored, 7 touchdowns, I think, in week 1. But this Oregon defense, boy, they got woken up, especially in that second half. They have been woken up, and they are going to be – and this Oregon run game – and then the Boise State game happened. And Boise State not only came in and was counterpunching, but Oregon was making mistakes and ultimately sneaks out of their own home stadium with a win, which – boy, oh boy, when we look back at the season, that one might be a forgotten game, but if you look at where Oregon wants to be, that could be a very, very important couple of series there in that fourth quarter because it was very tight between Boise. And if you go back with without bias, Boise should have won that game. Boise did everything you were supposed to do in facing a power conference opponent on the road. They did everything they were supposed to do. They ran the ball. They flexed their muscle. They did not flinch when Oregon hit the big hit plays. And all of a sudden, Oregon sneaks out with a victory. And I think when the season's over, I think Oregon's going to be very lucky they got that one. Yes, Brenden.
A couple thoughts. One on Oregon and then one on Eck. I want to do Eck real quick, Justin. So just curious for him, there's not going to be any, loyalty. His coaching career has been so, all over the place as far as South Dakota State, Minnesota. He's obviously a Wisconsin offensive lineman, but it'll be interesting to see where his career goes. And then I bring back to Oregon something that you mentioned to me right after that Idaho game that I think is it's uncanny, and we will expand upon it more and make or miss. Are we sure Oregon isn't 2000 Oregon State? Close win, close call, bunch of transfers, trying to figure some things out. Then they get better
potentially,
and better.
Potentially could be.
There could be something there. I see that.
I'm hoping so, but it was a nail-biter against Boise at Autzen, and then obviously there was a lot of nerves, including my own, going into this game against the Beavs. And this is what happens when you haven't won at Reser Stadium the last 2 times you went there, and you were favored fairly heavily in both. Obviously, the COVID game was a weird one. The fact that it was middle of the season, but it was after Thanksgiving and only one of 6. But again, a couple of years ago when Bo Nix and company were coming in and you had everything on the line, including the Pac-12 championship game, And all of a sudden, Oregon State's got those 2 wins. So you go in with some nervousness. And I think there was, obviously for Oregon fans, myself included, there was some nervousness at the half. Yeah, Oregon scoring at will against this Oregon State defense. Gabriel is not being touched. He is not being sacked. And finally, for Oregon, the running game is going. Jordan James averaging about 7 yards a carry. And for the first time in the season, Oregon kind of unleashed Dylan Gabriel as a running threat, as a running option. He was not in the first 2 weeks of the season. So here we are from an Oregon perspective. Are these the real Oregon Ducks? Is this the team that a lot of people bought in on and were fired up about, that, Desmond Howard and Kirk Herbstreit were picking as potential national champions, and were the first 2 weeks just essentially ironing out the wrinkles? Or does this team still have some flaws? Does this team still have to figure some things out? And did they just have it all click on an afternoon at Reser Stadium where Oregon State was outmatched in the second half? And it was a tough matchup on top of that. So I'm not ready to start throwing a parade just yet. I'm not ready to get back into seeing what flights to Atlanta are going to be in January. Not quite ready, but I watched Georgia play a nail-biter against Kentucky. I watched Michigan play a 10-point game against Arkansas State. I watched a lot of college football. Tennessee looks really good. But in terms of getting back into the mix of potentially being in the playoff hunt, being in the Final Four hunt, maybe even potentially in the national title hunt, this game was huge, I think, for Oregon's fan base, but also probably for that locker room of that's because there were some Oregon fans, I think foolishly so, who were like, whoa. What's going on with Dylan Gabriel? Why doesn't this guy look like Bo Nix? And it's like, it might take some time. It might take some time with a new system, new running back. Because remember, Bo Nix came in with Kenny Dillingham, who was a coordinator of his at Auburn. Those two were not exactly a package deal, but you could see, if you go back 2 years ago, which is why I made the prediction when Bo Nix entered the transfer portal, I go, he's going to Oregon. He had a connection with Kenny Dillingham. Kenny Dillingham's coming in. You go back to Michael Penix. Michael Penix came in with Kalen DeBoer. They had a relationship before. This was different. Dylan Gabriel came in. He had no connection to Dan Lanning, Will Stein, or anything in this offense. It's going to take some time. And it finally seemed to click at Reser on Saturday. Again, like I said, not ready to throw a parade, but in terms of can Oregon be in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship, this was the performance that Oregon fans needed. And I think more importantly, it was the performance that the Oregon locker room and that team needed to be like, yep, Gabriel's our guy. We still got all these weapons. We can still run the ball, by the way. And to me, that was, Brenden, that was everything, especially in that second half, was Oregon running the ball, opened everything up. The first 2 weeks of the season for Oregon, they could not get the running game going. And then, boom, 240 on the ground, averaging 7 yards a carry, 4 touchdowns on the ground. That was the difference. That was the difference in the ball game, was they could run the ball. They couldn't run the ball against Boise.
It's true. And everything that you just said, plus, from my perspective, I saw a defense and a team that just quit in the second half. And I saw an Oregon State offense that said, well, what's the point if our defense can't stop them? And, you could see, because there were 3 possessions in the first half where Oregon State looked quite good and can move the ball down. They took a while, but they moved the ball. Mm-hmm. 2 of them were touchdowns, and one of them was obviously the blocked field goal. Was a 4th and 1 that shouldn't have had a false start, that kind of put them behind the 8 ball a little bit. But in that second half, it was, we wrote about it. It was very Tim Tibesar-esque. Like, that was not a Trent, and get this, Justin. This was Oregon State's worst home defeat since 2019 by losses. They had not gotten their rear kicked like this at home in many moons.
5 years.
And
that was 2 years into the rebuild.
You got to answer the music and face the piper. I don't care who you are.
Okay,
you want to play this game, then find out why you were blown out. I mean, dare I say, might even just give the other guy that might need to unshun the other guy. Maybe he knew how to get his guys really revved up at home.
Okay, well, let me ask you this, because that's an interesting stat that they haven't been blown out at home in 5 years. Because here's what I wonder. I don't think the outcome is all that different, but was there maybe a different feel in that fourth quarter because this was week 3 in September and the game was over? Game was over. The game was in doubt. And I just wonder if this is a conference game in the second half, do you keep throwing stuff? Do you keep trying to do trick plays? But instead it's like, guys, it's week 3. We've got – because they're on bye this week.
No, they've got Purdue this week.
Oh, got Purdue.
Yeah, you guys are on bye.
Got Purdue. Purdue got their – oh, Purdue looked terrible.
That's helpful.
Against Notre Dame.
That's helpful.
But it's like
yeah.
You do have to wonder – because I certainly understand the frustration that Oregon State fans got to feel of like, all right, yeah. Not like expecting to win every game, but under Jonathan Smith, they competed in every game. There was a handful where they got, it got a little bit fast and loose, but none of them were at home, and you could trust that if you paid your money and drove to Reeser, that it was likely going to be a game. And I wonder if when it got to be, end of third quarter, right? And Oregon State could not move the ball in the third quarter. Like, Oregon had completely tightened up the screws. They figured out, all right, McCoy's the only one that's doing any damage right here. Let's figure this out. They did. Oregon State couldn't move the ball. And then it was, 32? It was 32-0 at that point. And then Oregon would go on to kind of keep rolling downhill. How much of that fourth quarter from Trent Bray was, guys, it's week 3. It's week 3. We got Purdue. We got a full schedule of games.
It could be.
Maybe not playing for a playoff spot, but you know what? Getting to a bowl would be nice. I'm not saying quitting, but these games kind of happen in week 3. You've seen it where a team will just go, you know what? Live to fight another day. Whereas we are so used to, other than the COVID year, Civil War. There is no other day. There is no other day. It's the last game of the season. It's like, it's week 3. We got a full schedule ahead.
I mean, to your point, Justin, I think you nailed it as far as it's the fans, right? It is the fans who have been told this was the most expensive game of the year. This is really the only look at it. Okay, Washington State, decent. UNLV, new life in that game. Hey man, the running Rebs, man. They maybe they need an invite to the new conference, but
certainly played like they wanted one,
right? But that all being said, Justin, like you said, it is the fans who left the program under Gary Anderson, the early years of Jonathan Smith, who are like, if you're not going to give me a competitive product at home, I'm going to sit my butt on my couch and watch my TV. That's why I said it. Just you can't overreact to one game. But it brought back shades of so this is what
Purdue is going to be such a big game.
Oh yeah,
Purdue is
totally,
going to be a big game. It's a power conference and opponent. I don't know. I don't think Purdue's going to do anything this year. They go 66 points to Notre Dame.
They're 6-point favorites as we sit, Justin.
The Beavs are?
Yeah,
6-point favorites at home,
which is a little higher than I thought it'd be. As pick 'em. I thought it did.
But that's going to be an important game because you're right. I think there's a fan base in Corvallis. The leaving behind, I felt like finally felt real in that second half. You go back even when the announcement was made a year and a half ago. It's like, all right, well, let's try to be disruptors. We're the last left, and then you get into the off season, and it's like, us and the Cougs, we're linked arm in arm. And you play a game against Idaho State. You play a game against San Diego State. Those are, Brenden, that's normal. That's a normal Oregon State schedule. The field looks normal because the Pac-12 logo's still there. And then I think for the first time, it's like Oregon's playing in September, and they kick the dog out of them. And Oregon's moving on to a Big Ten schedule. And I wonder if just for a fan base, it just kind of felt, yep, there it is, right there.
It did.
That's the first bit of evidence that we got left behind. Meanwhile, the Cougs were like, screw you, and you're left behind. We're going to take advantage of a of a brand new Washington team that doesn't quite know which direction they're running in. You're on a short side option on a 4th and goal for the Apple Cup. Anyways, we might talk about that coming up on campus. But
yeah, like very different. Justin, I think your worries about Washington this year, you can kind of quiet that just a little bit because
I make observations in September, Brenden, not conclusions, and we've seen it before. I mean, even with the Beavs, we've seen it before where teams can get better and teams by November can show up. We'll see how Washington reacts. That's going to be an interesting scene there because they're in kind of not the same bubble as Oregon, but like a lot of new faces. A lot of new faces up in Seattle, including a whole new coaching staff. But getting back to this game, yeah, it was I think for Oregon it was a much needed shot of life of Gabriel can move the ball, Oregon can run the ball. And by the way, Oregon's big offensive lineman from Indiana still hasn't played. And I have a hunch that the schedule might have a little bit to do with that as well, because you had Oregon State, then you have a bye, and then you're on the road to UCLA. UCLA, again, did not look good.
That's the understatement of the weekend.
So I would imagine if I'm Dan Lanning, it's like we don't need to push any injuries at this particular point.
Do you think they had to tell Indiana that they're in L.A. or UCLA and we're in L.A.?
Yeah.
Los Angeles.
Indiana seemed to find it just fine. And you know what else they found? The end zone.
It was so bad.
The end zone, they found a lot.
You said you like Kirk Cignetti and what he was able to do coming over from James Madison.
All he does is win.
Yeah, DJ Khaled.
Everywhere he goes, DJ Khaled. Only Kirk Cignetti actually wins. He doesn't just say it. But yeah,
yes.
Everywhere that dude is, it's the same way with like Matt Rule. Like you look at Matt Rule. Like what's going on at Nebraska right now, which if you are not paying attention, you need to, should not be a surprise. Matt Rule took over Buffalo. They were 2-10 when he took over. 2 years later, they had a 10-win season at Buffalo. Took over Baylor. 1-11 when he took over Baylor. 3 years later, 10 wins in the Big 12 championship game. Goes to the NFL, learns a little bit about salary caps and the quarterbacks that you can get when you have a salary cap, leaves, takes over an abysmal Nebraska team. 2 years later, they're going to be a big factor in this Big Ten. And you get the number one recruit and everything. Like, coaches like that, they win everywhere.
And I think it matters. And I think it's worth mentioning, Justin, as time goes on. Sure, Matt Rule's to blame for Carolina. I think Carolina's to blame for Carolina.
That's what I'm saying. Is like when you get these coaches who are used to running everything their way, and you go to a place like Carolina, and you've got a weirdo owner who's like, "No, I'm gonna need meetings every week." It's like, what? It's like, yeah, I cut your check.
A weirdo billionaire hedge fund, man. What can you say?
You know what? Yeah. Guy who's throwing drinks at fans from the stands. Like, that's what was going on in Carolina. Oh, boy, I can't wait to talk about NFL tomorrow. Because it was an interesting Saturday. Or, excuse me, it was an interesting Sunday. But it was also an interesting Saturday because it wasn't just Oregon getting back in the mix. They stayed in the top 10 of the AP. And, again, Oregon fans, stop worrying about the AP poll. It is as irrelevant as it has ever been. The AP poll does not matter. What matters is winning games, moving forward, and being there in the Big Ten championship come November or December. I guess it would be December. That's all that matters. Stop worrying about the AP poll. But you look at the other teams in the top 10. Did Georgia just have a bad day? Or did Kentucky do to Georgia what Rocky did to Drago and like, see? He bleeds. He's a man. He's not a machine. Did Georgia show a little vulnerability? Is Alabama still absolute powerhouse? And watch out for Tennessee. We've got some college football around the country to dive into on campus next. 620 Rip City Radio. All right, time to wrap up hour number one. We'll dive back into some thoughts from Saturday afternoon at Reser. A Civil War unlike any other, but a blowout for Oregon as they put themselves back in the discussion, back in the mix in college football in terms of the college football playoff. But there were some interesting outcomes across the country. We dive into some of the more interesting as we go on campus. Here we go. All right, first thing I want to get this out because I watched a ton of college football this weekend. The officiating feels like it's as bad as it's ever been in terms of, I think we are at a point where I think even the officials don't quite understand what they're looking for at particular times. And I know, look, there's, especially in the non-conference, there's a lot of games going on, right? And when Power Five's playing Group of Five and you're kind of spread a little bit thin, but I saw so many rules officials, experts, the guys that they pay to be on ESPN and on Fox, and they go to I don't quite know what they were doing there. Blocks in the back that didn't really seem to be blocks in the back. Illegal blindside blocks that looked to be fairly tame. At some point, there is going to be a reckoning in college football with the amount of money that is being gambled and with the amount of money that is up for grabs, because there was a play in the Georgia-Kentucky game that could have changed the outcome of that game. There was a play in the South Carolina-LSU game that could have changed the outcome of that game. There were far too many questionable calls in the college football world, and I hate the fact that we're talking about officials, but with the amount of money that's at stake and with the amount of technology that we have, it makes no sense that you can't get calls right. Now, first question from Saturday outside of the Oregon State game. Is Georgia mortal or did they just have a bad day? 13-12 was your final. 13-12 was your final against Kentucky. Kentucky's 1-2, by the way, and Kentucky coming off of a disastrous loss to South Carolina last week. Kentucky, let's see, outgained them on the ground. 170 to 102, outgained them total 294 to 262. Half the penalties. Kentucky did have the one turnover, but Georgia only put up 13 points in the conference opponents. Brenden, is Georgia mortal? Are they mortal?
I think so. Absolutely.
I mean, Kentucky's not that good. This was not
going on there. They can get sneaky sometimes, but it is concerning, yes.
Because Kentucky looked terrible against South Carolina last week. So I think there is, you know how they do that on Twitter with the eyeballs emojis of like, I think college football just looked at Georgia in a 13-12 win. Now, on the road, in conference, those are the hardest games to win, and you got out with a win. Every team gets a clunker. Every team, because we're dealing with college kids put up clunkers. Every team gets a clunker. But I think there are a lot of people going, what's going on there with Georgia? Other interesting outcome over the weekend, Alabama, still Alabama. Alabama went into Wisconsin, big noon kickoff. Everybody's all fired up. Jalen Milroe dropped 5 touchdowns on him. Now, second play from scrimmage, I believe, Wisconsin's quarterback, Tyler Van Dyke, goes out. He gets carted off. It looked like a pretty significant knee injury. That being said, Tyler Van Dyke doesn't play any defense, and Alabama is still Alabama. Utah, interestingly, in a bit of a dogfight with Utah State. Kyle Whittingham, still up to his Kyle Whittingham ways. We're never going to know anything about Cam Rising ever. We're just never going to. This is never going to do it. This is never going to tell anything about. It's like, is Cam going to play? Yeah, he might. Cam Rising did not play in the game. and Utah hangs on. They get a 38-21 victory. I think, and we talked about Nebraska last segment, most telling, and again, they ain't played nobody, Paul, but Tennessee, Iamaleava, by the way, learn to pronounce that name. Nico Iamaleava. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. Learn to pronounce it. They put up 69 points against Chattanooga in the opening weekend. They beat NC State 51-10, and they put up 71 against Kent State. Watch out for the Tennessee Volunteers. They might be the best team in the country. Now, again, they're going to play at Oklahoma this weekend. We'll find out. They get on the road. They get outside of Neyland Stadium, and they get an opponent in Oklahoma that is going to have the ability to punch back. But Tennessee looked very, very good. And I mentioned it after week one, and I see no evidence. I think the U is back. I think the U is back. I think Cam Ward's on a Heisman trajectory with what he did against Ball State. They have scored. They beat the dog out of Florida 41-17. They beat Florida A&M 56-9 and 62-0. The only reason right now in the next 90 seconds that I am bringing up the Florida Gators is because, Brenden, you saw a stat a couple of weeks ago. When Nick Saban retired, it affected, 400 careers? Something like that? 400 careers. One man decides, I've had enough, I'm hanging it up. Kalen DeBoer's entire staff goes from Washington to Alabama. Alabama's entire staff kind of scatters all over the place. Jed Fish's staff goes from Arizona. Brendan's staff comes from San Jose, and on and on and on. Not to that level, but Florida's going to fire Billy Napier. He just lost to Texas A&M at home.
Some of us...
He's lost to Miami at home, which you said that was it. And they lost to Texas A&M at home.
Yeah,
he's getting fired.
Some of us got a chance to hear him speak before and after getting annihilated by Oregon State.
In a
and I
Vegas
looked
Bowl?
at that dude and I'm like, you're a fraud. I didn't say that, but I knew it in my head, and I've maintained that opinion ever since. And it's played out that way. Like, Florida, you want to be Florida, you don't go hire a coach from Louisiana Lafayette. I'm sorry. You go hire a sitting Power 4, Power 5 coach. If you're Florida, you're freaking Florida.
So here's what's interesting. They're going to fire Billy Napier.
Oh, yeah.
I have said, and I might be...
$25 million
I
buyout.
believe Florida is a top 5. Bare minimum, it's a top 10 job.
Has to be.
It's a top 10 job in America.
So Louisiana Lafayette? Come on.
But what I'm saying is, I don't know if he's going to make it to Halloween. I'd be shocked if he makes it to the month of October. They play at Mississippi State. Mississippi State stinks. But
want to hear my
Mississippi State just got locked down by Toledo. But if Billy Napier gets – there is going to be a coaching carousel unlike anything we have seen. Florida's a huge job.
You want to hear my number one candidate for it, Justin? This is going to be crazy.
Don't say Dan Lanning.
There is – no. Oh, gosh, no. No,
Okay.
there's no connection.
All right.
This guy up in Seattle, Florida alum, Jed Fish.
Is he go one and done at the Huskies? Is he go one and done at the Huskies?
He makes $7 million at Washington. Couldn't Florida up that if they wanted to?
They can do whatever they want. There's no, it's all monopoly money. All right.
Florida graduate.
Coming up next, we got Make or Miss, hour number 2. We've also got some more to dive into with Civil War on Saturday and a whole lot more. Rip City Mornings next, 620 Rip City Radio.
7 a.m. on a Monday. Brendan Slaughter with you for Rip City Mornings. The Oregon Ducks cruised past Oregon State behind a big second half to take the rivalry 49-14. Oregon holds steady in the polls at number 9 as they will have an off week before beginning Big Ten play at UCLA on the 28th. And the Seattle Seahawks are 2-0. 2-0 in the Mike McDonald era after a 23-20 overtime win over the New England Patriots in Foxborough. Big moves there for the Seahawks in the first couple weeks. Coming up on the big show, we're going to have WWE's Damin Priest on the show live in the third hour. We got Make or Miss, whole lot more. 2 more hours, Rip City Mornings here on a Monday.
Hey, welcome back to Rip City Mornings, everybody. Hopefully you are having a fantastic Monday morning. As Brenden just told you, we've got Make or Miss coming up this hour. We've got some stuff we saw on the internet as well. If you're new to the show, welcome. Glad to have you. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you like what you hear, hey, could you tell a friend? And if you are a returning customer, again, welcome back. Obviously, a ton of Oregon State. There was that very popular, very catchy Eminem song back in the day. Will the real Slim Shady please stand up? And we're hearing a lot of that because Joe Burrow looks like Slim Shady, and we don't know if Joe Burrow doesn't look like Joe Burrow again. More on that tomorrow.
Talk about the staying power of Eminem, too.
I know.
25 years and still just dropping bangers.
Catchy hits. But will the real Slim Shady please stand? Will the real Oregon Ducks please stand up? And will the real Oregon State Beavers please stand up? Because I think after this game at Autzen Stadium, I'm reminded of a conversation I had one time with Mike Bellotti. No big deal. Name drop a college football Hall of Famer. But I was lucky enough in my time in Eugene to be able to, a couple of times every year, I would get to interview Mike Bellotti. And Mike Bellotti said one time, it's never as good as you think it is, and it's never as bad as you think it is. It's always somewhere in the middle. And for Oregon fans, the sky was falling the first 2 weeks. Understood it. The sky was falling. But it wasn't as bad as you think. You go back and you look at those games and look at the yardage against Idaho. Obviously, turnovers and costly penalties and fixable mistakes against Boise and a team in Boise that was able to punch back a little bit. But the sky was falling. And then tale of caution. Yeah, everything clicked for the Ducks this week. Not everything is as good as it seems. Not everything is as bad as it seems. And I think for Oregon State, kind of the same predicament. Is I don't know if it's as bad. 49-14 getting shut out in the second half. It didn't look good. It didn't look good. But I don't know if the sky is currently falling in Corvallis. We're going to dive into that in a couple of minutes. Let's start here with Oregon. Is Oregon back? Was the first 2 weeks of the season a blip on the radar? Was the first 2 weeks of the season ironing out the wrinkles? I think so. Oregon homer alert coming. Yes, it was 24-14 against Idaho in week 1. But as I mentioned, Dylan Gabriel threw for 380 yards in that game. He threw for 2 touchdowns in that game. Problem was Oregon only ran for $107. So when you look at the statistics, the fact that Oregon had 487 yards of offense against Idaho's 217 in week 1, and the fact that Oregon threw for 380, 41 of 50 in that game. Problem was, for whatever reason, could not get rolling downhill, couldn't get the ball into the end zone. And to Idaho's credit, who, by the way, has rattled off 2 wins since that day, just like Mike McDermott in Rounders, just kept hanging around and hanging around and hanging around. And then Boise happened. Boise's a good team. Now, should you be winning on walk-off field goals at home against Boise in week 2 if you want to win a national championship? No, you should not. But, again, I go back and look at the numbers. Oregon threw for 243 yards that day. Dylan Gabriel was 18 of 21. He was 18 of 21. 3 incomplete passes. I don't know about you all. Every coach in the country would take 3 incomplete passes and throwing for over 243 yards. Once again, the problem was Oregon could not get the run game going. The other problem was 2 fumbles lost in the fourth quarter. Now, you made up for that with 2 special teams plays, but 2 fumbles lost in the fourth quarter combined with 3 yards a carry. But with Dylan Gabriel, because, again, quarterbacks will matter. And in college football, at a certain point, a quarterback's going to have to win you a game at some point. Gabriel was 18 of 21. Was able to throw for 243 yards. Was sacked, I think, 4 times. But you look at the statistics, you look at the efficiency, you look at what Dylan Gabriel's been doing, and while it's tough to see it through a 10-point win against Idaho and a 3-point win against Boise, I think you kind of finally saw it when he went 24 of 20 for 291 against the Beavs. 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and more importantly, I do not believe he was touched the entire day. I believe that Dylan Gabriel's uniform, and I know they play on turf, but I don't think they had to wash his uniform. Do not believe he got touched the entire day. Some of that's on Oregon State. Some of that's on Oregon's offensive line, kind of getting it figured out. Is everything fixed? No. Not everything is fixed. But when you look at the statistics of those first 2 games, while the outcome and the scoreboards and scores matter the most, you combine that with what Oregon did on Saturday, I think Oregon is more of a playoff team than is not. They didn't look like it last week, but I think this week, this was not some magic elixir, right? Play Oregon State, rinse and repeat. But what it was I think, finally a stamp of approval that, yeah, your eyeballs were not deceiving you. The statistics, the numbers were not lying. This is a team that is capable of putting up big-time points. So if I were to say, is Oregon more 49-14 against Oregon State, or is Oregon more squeaking out wins against Idaho and Boise? I'm leaning more towards what we saw on Saturday. That might be recency bias. And again, Oregon homer alert. But go back and look at the statistics, especially for Dylan. You keep Gabriel upright and you run the ball, it opens up everything. It opens up everything. And take a look. Tez Johnson, 100 yards receiving. Jaden Lamar, 71 yards receiving. Ferguson, 45 yards receiving. Trayshawn Holden, 40 yards and a touchdown. Spreading the wealth all over the place. And in the second half, and Brenden, you were there, it looked like Oregon at that point had the Beavs on skates. Especially on the defensive side of the ball. They kind of had them on skates.
Everything you said is true, but there has to be an account for the fact that Oregon State hasn't played defense that, a word I can't use on the radio, terribly in 5 years.
Yeah.
At least, period. Like again, it goes back, and that's why it was questions in the press conference abound. Like, this was a defense that got Tim Tibesar fired when Jonathan Smith was still head coach. Like, it was not that. That's still the most shocking thing. It's like, sure, there were aberrations on the road, but like, to your point, Justin, whether it was Oregon's offense being that great, and I think it's somewhere in the middle, because I don't think Oregon figured everything out.
No,
I just think
not by a long shot.
Offensively, defensively, they're pretty good too. But offensively, I think they got there, realized there was very little resistance, and were like, like putting my story. They were like a cat with a ball of yarn to the Oregon State defense, whether it was a Dylan Gabriel option scramble for a touchdown, Tez and I'm drawing and
Trayshawn Holden,
Evan Stewart. I was going to say rather just running those button hooks every play. Yeah, and it was like, there's not a guy within 5-10 yards. So it really did look like Oregon was going through playing a scrimmage at times. And I don't know whether that's a bigger indictment on Oregon State or Oregon being that good. I lean towards it being a bigger indictment on Oregon State, but I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, and that's where I was going to bring up this next question. Personally, and again, you know me because I'm an Oregon homer, I think I think Oregon, outside of Ohio State, maybe at Michigan, I think Oregon's offense is going to make a lot of defenses look a little bit silly. Now, that being said, Oregon State is supposed to be a defensive team, right? They got a defensive coach. They shut out San Diego State on the road the week before, right? It's supposed to be a defensive team, and that's not a performance you're used to seeing over the last 4 years from Oregon State because they've always kind of made their identity about being tough, physical, and we're going to be able to play tough defense against the best players in the country. And like you said, the first time that really they got it put on them. Now, here's my question. I think Oregon is more what we saw on Saturday than what we saw the 2 previous weeks. And I base that off of some statistics, and I also base that off of just kind of what they were trying to do against Boise, and then costly fumble, costly turnover. Those were eliminated, and you kind of saw it. Do you think the Beavs are more about what we saw week 1 and 2, or do you think the Beavs are more about what we saw at Reser Stadium on Saturday? And I know the answer is always kind of somewhere in the middle, but
I think we're going
gut feeling. Which are you still comfortable with the season ahead? Like you said, Purdue, Colorado State. Oh, how about them? You get Purdue and Colorado State at home the next 2 games.
It brought back the fears. Like you're going to struggle in all the teams you don't play Mountain West games. You will struggle against Boise. You will struggle against Washington State. Used to be, hey, Oregon State, Washington State, you got that game at home. Oh, well, apparently playing at home doesn't really mean much anymore. So you got that. UNLV is at home, and they just beat Kansas on the road.
Yeah, UNLV just beat Kansas.
So,
UNLV became much bigger deal.
Like to your Pilati quote is absolutely spot on. But in this particular case, like I think it's easier to look back and go, Idaho State's terrible. San Diego State is terrible.
But
Let's check in after Purdue.
You shut them out. And Purdue might not be very good either.
Right. So
to be fair.
So I go back to what I mentioned with you, Justin, where I said Oregon State probably would not know about this team until after they played Purdue. And that might still be the case because you go lose to Purdue, who is the worst Big Ten team, and it's not even close, I think.
I think you might be right.
I'm basing that off what you've said.
100%. I think you might be right.
And, it's a big opportunity. But, yeah, I mean, Oregon State got smacked in the mouth, and I think a lot of Beaver fans were real disappointed at how the second half went. I mean, I think
you take it back. UCLA might be the worst team in the Big Ten.
Okay, fair. But right up there.
Purdue, UCLA are right there at the bottom.
They, without a doubt, it is one game, and it's never as good or bad as you mentioned. But to get your teeth kicked in like that at home and had some real early Jonathan Smith, late Gary Anderson vibes to it, it's like, oh, what's the rebuild going to be this?
Bounce back's going to be huge.
Yeah.
Going to bounce back against Purdue, like you mentioned, is going to be huge. And again, every coach deals with this. New head coach, guess what? Here's your first test. How can you keep momentum? Can you put this one in the rearview mirror as fast as possible? And can you not let that simmer and just hang on all season long? All right, coming up next, we've got Make or Miss, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, coming up in an hour from now, in studio, former world heavyweight champion of the WWE. He's going to be at Moda Center tonight, Monday Night Raw. Brenden, you'll pay for the entire seat. You only need the edge. That's all that matters on Monday Night Raw. Coming up, Damin Priest is going to be joining us live in studio. So I might get to talk some old school wrestling and maybe some new school wrestling with Damin Priest coming up in approximately an hour from now. We've got some stuff we saw on the internet, shake up in the AP Top 25, at least at the top, anyways. But right now, let's dive into Make or Miss. Here we go.
All right, firing up Make or Miss. Oregon State, Scott Barnes, you can draw something from Wake Forest.
Okay, so... All right, let's talk it out. Let's do it. You brought it up. So real quick, for context, Wake Forest played Ole Miss this weekend.
And we're blown out.
20-3, I believe, at the end of the first quarter. And to be fair, Kiffin took his foot off the gas. Like, it doesn't look as bad in the final score, because it was, 41-10, something like that was the final. But it was 20-3 at the end of the first quarter. And apparently after the game, Lane Kiffin went to the podium, and he was informed that, or maybe it was Sunday. But either way.
No, they were informed midweek before the game.
Okay, before the game even played,
yep.
And then Ole Miss put it on him, and Wake Forest was like, "Yeah,
that's why
we're not going back there. We're not going to go back and play you."
And paid $1 million to Ole Miss to.
They said, "We'll cut the check. You guys will figure it out." Obviously, Brenden and I feel differently about whether or not this game should be played, and I can understand his perspective. I come from a different spot where I want Oregon and Oregon State to play every single year, probably because I love the rivalry. I don't want the rivalry to die.
So it doesn't, again, can I just, and I don't mean this negatively.
Yeah.
Easy for you to say when your team wins 8
we're gonna get into that,
8 out of 10 times. We did the math. Oregon's now won 7 out of the last 10 matchups.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Oregon State would like to play a game they get a chance to win 30% of the time, or maybe even less.
So there's 3 factors at play here. First factor is tradition. It is, and there's local economics, right? I think it's good for the Mid-Willamette Valley that this game is played. I would imagine there were some places in and around Corvallis that probably had a bit of a heyday. I'm sure the hotels maybe did a little upcharging. Who knows? But local economics, but more importantly, tradition. Now, what does tradition mean? Not much in the college football world. So, but there's that. There's the, as you alluded to, Brenden, there's the competitiveness part of this. And you're right. If Oregon State is not going to be competitive, why would you schedule a loss each and every year when you can just not do it, right? When you look at some of the other non-conference rivalry games, right? Florida and Florida State, that's a back and forth rivalry. Florida stinks right now. Well, Florida State kind of stinks right now too. But you know what I mean? Clemson, South Carolina, for years and years and years, they would go back and forth, back and forth. They're obviously in different conferences. This one is very, very different. So there's a competitiveness part of it. Now, there's the third part, which is football economics. Is it financially beneficial to continue to play the game? If you can, like there used to be, slap a corporate ad on it and sell. Maybe go back to the old name. I don't know.
I think
but you know what I mean? Is there like a football TV package it and all of that? Is there a football economics part of it?
And I think if you were to ask most Beaver fans, they'd go, give me my game in Bryant-Denny Stadium against Alabama if we need a paycheck.
Yeah.
Before we play these guys again.
Well, and then I guess there's the fourth factor, which I didn't throw in there. The fourth factor is, what's the Pac-12 going to look like in 4 years? In 4 years, not 2 years, when it's going to reemerge from the depth, but what is the Pac-12 going to look like in 4 years? If the Pac-12 gets Cal and Stanford, which we talked last week, I don't think they're going to do, but if they do and become the best of the group of 5 conferences, or maybe even a hybrid mid-major and maybe gets up at Big 12 level, it might not be a very sound game to schedule, because if you can get to a point where the Pac-12 is, let's say, the best of the group of 5, you're already going to be playing Boise. You're already going to be playing Washington State. You're already going to be playing UNLV. You're already going to be like, do you really want to throw in a team that is likely going to be top 10, if not top 15, every single time you play them? Because your goal at that point is to get to the college football playoff, right? That's the goal. Get to the college football playoff. It is now more possible than ever if you could run the table, go 11-1, let's say, win the new Pac-12, which is the old Mountain West, right? I don't know if it's beneficial to play Oregon to get to the national title. I don't know the answer to that. You know what I mean? To me, I think that's the other big factor. Is it going, if you're Oregon State and you look ahead in your crystal ball in 4 years and go, all right, we're rebuilding the Pac-12. We've got 6. We're going to get a couple more. You could steal from the American. You could maybe even steal from Conference USA. You might even pick up some of the downfall of the ACC if, in fact, the ACC collapses.
Well, here's what's going to happen.
But if you do, what is the best path forward to get to the college football playoff? And if playing Oregon every year is not in your best path forward, then, yeah, you got to pull the plug, because getting to the playoffs is everything. Getting to the playoffs is everything.
I mean, I think this is,
as much as I hate to say it,
I think this is very cut and dry. From what I've heard, excuse me, I had a sneeze.
There you go. Bless you.
From what I've heard, the game next year will be played. There's no rooms in the schedule to play it. 2028 or what is that? 2026 and 7. Good. Let the game go away for 2 years. You can ask
take a breather.
You can let Beaver fans decide if they want to play the game, because easy enough for Oregon when you can go in and like, there's not really, again, you've lost twice at Reser. Let's take out the COVID year. So lost one time at Reser since 2008.
Yeah.
Yeah, not really anything a lot of us are dying to keep playing, I don't think.
No, they lost in 2016.
Okay.
2016. Never forget.
Well, again,
never forget.
Now, was that because Oregon wanted to not play for Mark Helfrich next year? Because, again, that was Gary Anderson calling plays on the other sideline.
Brenden, it is interesting because, like, if you were to talk Oregon State 2017, right? 2017, you were there. You called the game. It's one of my favorite stories that you tell me, which is you're there calling the game, and you go to your broadcast partner and you go, and the Beavers are fighting themselves on the sideline.
Yes, that did happen.
If you were to go there and go, what's the prognosis of both of these teams moving forward? I don't know if 2 home wins would be on the docket from where Oregon State was, as bad as it wasn't. So what I'm saying is if you would have said 3 years after that Oregon State was going to beat the Ducks in an empty stadium in the middle of a pandemic, where Mario Cristobal is going to be their head coach and Jonathan Stewart, like, the universe in sports world is really weird. Now, I don't think Landing's going anywhere. I don't think Oregon in the Big Ten is going to be lost for cash, and I don't think NIL is going to get fixed anytime soon. And I think Oregon's going to continue to play with the big boys, but it is one of those things where you do never know. And it is an interesting strategy to play next year, take a 2-year breather, see where what the Pac-12 looks like,
because
see what
even
college
now,
football looks like.
I don't understand if you're, I guess you got to complete the home and home, but, like, that's where this make or miss came from. It's like you shoot yourself in the foot so bad, being like, yep, all right, schedule comes up, that's a loss and all. It's like you just so negative when you need to pile up wins in this new world. Like I said, Scott Barnes, Oregon State's athletic director, was steadfast on Saturday in the press box, saying that they wanted to continue this series, I would encourage Scott Barnes to listen to his fan base, because there were an awful lot of people, not just from what I hear at, Beavers Edge and everything else, Justin. There were a lot of people who were like, what is the purpose of this game?
Well, I think look no further than a couple of hours north and see, like, again, going back to what if I would have told you that Washington and Washington State would play the game that they played on Saturday. And again, I don't think Landing's going anywhere, but what if Florida fires Billy Napier and goes to Dan Lanning and says, we'll pay you anything we want? It's just, remember when Washington State had Rolovich? Remember that time? Remember when Washington State was such an absolute joke of a program with Rolovich, and he's in a lawsuit and the whole COVID
still
stuff?
Still active, I believe.
I still believe
Yeah, that's
so.
still ongoing.
I think that's going to the Supreme Court. But you know what I mean? Like, Mike Leach left and then sadly died at Mississippi State. Rolovich came in, and it turns a bad situation worse. Now, you can look back and determine who was right and who was wrong. That's not for me to decide. But I know that the Cougs were in a bad spot, and it was made worse by the whole Rolovich vaccine, everything that came along with that. And then he gets dismissed. And Dickert looked like a guy that was just like, hey, can you fill a gap for us? Because our world is A couple years later, he beats the Huskies in Seattle. Now, it wasn't in Husky Stadium, but they beat the Huskies in Seattle, get a monumental victory for Washington State, talked about victory forever in a game that I bet a lot of Cougs probably said we don't want to play that game. Especially a lot of Cougs were saying we don't want to play that game in Seattle. And what's going to be interesting, it's funny because from your perspective, I understand it. If you're the Huskies, do you ever play the Cougs ever again? You got a hard enough time winning the Big Ten. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, especially with the rest of the season. What if the Beavs go on to win 10 games this year? And you're only, you beat either Boise or you beat Washington State, and you lose one of those, and you go 10-2. Do you think your mind could be changed?
It could.
If they go 10-2 this year?
With every bone in my body, that would surprise me. I think this team's going to struggle to get to 7 or 8 wins as currently constructed.
All right, let's do it. Let's run through it. I think they beat Purdue next week. I don't know if they're
Tell Hudson Cards, hey, remember I played at Texas. Let me just open this up on you boys. So again, I'm a little bit more of a cynic. You got to bring me back across the side as far as I'm not saying you, but
you're right. Purdue, it's such a bad taste right now, and it's understandable. But Oregon's top 3 team in the Big Ten.
They're a top
3.
They're a top 5 team nationally. If they play like they did that, they're top 5.
I think
that's the thing. You haven't seen them play that good all year.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
But I'm just thinking in the Big Ten, they're a top 3. Purdue's a bottom 2 team in the Big Ten. So
they did get annihilated by Notre Dame.
66 points Notre Dame put up on them.
But the week before, they beat Indiana State 49-0. So it's
like
they've only played 2 games, which is kind of weird. Again, that's a toss.
So there are a lot of people going could Purdue pull off this upset because Notre Dame's reeling? It's Notre Dame's no, we're ticked off. And when we're ticked off. So if the Beavs are ticked off at home, I don't know if you saw what Colorado could not. Colorado's defense has been atrocious all year. Colorado State couldn't move the ball.
Okay, so that's
they
maybe a
couldn't
couple.
move the ball. So you get two games at home. What are the Wolfpack doing this year?
They're not very good.
What are the Wolfpack doing?
Justin, I'm investing my own personal money.
Wolfpack's 1-3. They've lost to Georgia Southern. They've lost. Well, they got blanked by Minnesota this weekend.
I'm investing a lot of personal money into making that a vacation with the fam, so they're going to win that game. That one's set in stone.
All right, let's just Beavs win 3 more in a row. Toss-up game against UNLV.
I don't like that game. UNLV looked really good. I watched a lot of that game.
And then there's the Cal game. And I, because of dear friends, if they are listening, but I was forced late night watching Cal San Diego State. And
Cal
Brenden,
won,
let me
right?
tell you, that's 2.5 hours of my life I'll never get back.
So
it was
again,
good. It was good time with good company, but that football game was awful. While Cal did go into Auburn and beat Auburn, I don't know if Cal's very good.
Does Mike Norvell get fired if Cal beats Florida State this weekend and Florida State goes 0-4? Hot take on a Monday, man. If Wilcox goes into Doak Campbell and they beat DJ,
they got problems in Tallahassee.
Big
They got
problems.
some problems in Tallahassee.
Well, again,
I don't
maybe
think they-
maybe DJU's not that good. We said it for a long time, right? They have a lot more.
When somebody
problems.
tells you who they are, I guess you should probably believe them at
Like,
this point.
A lot, like, again, it is not fair to sit here and go, Florida State's problems are DJU. They're not. He's a part of it.
Yeah.
But Florida State's got big issues, like Justin said. But, you run through the rest of the schedule. I mean, yes, you should beat San Jose State. You should beat Air Force. I would not pick them against Washington State or Boise State right now. So that's 1, 2, 3.
You get the Cougs at home.
I got five games.
Is that the Saturday before Thanksgiving?
Yeah, Friday before Thanksgiving.
Friday before Thanksgiving.
9 a.m. So, yeah, that one's out.
No. I'm talking about the Cougs.
Oh,
when the
I'm
Cougs
sorry.
come to
Yeah,
Corvallis. That's the Saturday before Thanksgiving?
Yes, apologies. Sorry. Thank you.
And then a short week at Boise. Oh, boy, that's not good.
I see.
But the Cougs at home.
If you're Oregon State and you're Trent Bray now, Justin, I think you need to circle the wagons and realize how important it is to not lose You don't go to a bowl game this year. That's about as rock bottom as you possibly could get, considering you were coming into the year talking, well, if things break, we could go to the playoff or this. You now need to circle the wagons and make sure you don't lose contact and go 4-8, or 5-7, which is, again.
Well, look, Purdue,
State.
Colorado State, Nevada.
There's two.
You lose 2 of those 3. Then panic. I would say Panic at the Disco.
Great reference.
Disco being the Valley Football Complex, I believe is what it's called. You lose 2 of those 3, Panic at the Disco. You can go 3-0. You got a bye in there too, right? There's a bye in there after Purdue.
I think, like you said, Purdue might determine the season as far as what kind of a season it's going to be. Because again, it's a really bad Power 4 team.
I think Colorado State might be maybe more of a barometer.
That's
but you're
true.
right. But you get back into it. You get some tough defense. You keep Purdue handcuffed.
Yeah, it's just
you get a
Hudson's
win against a Big Ten school. We're back.
It's just Hudson Card and quarterback coach Drew Brees. They give me some worries, man. What can I say?
Well, they also gave up 66 points to Notre Dame.
Justin, I don't take anything week to week. I sit here going,
right.
well, Oregon played Boise real tight, and that was not the Oregon team we saw the first 2 weeks. So,
and by the way, I know they beat Idaho State. Idaho State's also lost to Eastern Illinois earlier this year. So, we'll see. Who knows? Again,
who knows? You're right.
It's
one more we got to get to before we close out.
Let's do it.
One more, because this was just too
I
great.
think they should keep playing the game.
I do not.
As someone whose teams won
But that's okay.
7 of the last 10.
We got to get to this, because this will not hold until NFL Talk tomorrow. Patrick Mahomes' best win yesterday might have been his birthday party.
What did I miss about Patrick Mahomes' birthday party?
So, Justin.
What did I miss about Patrick Mahomes' birthday party?
So we brought everyone back together. So the last 2 weeks since I'm going to just stick with me, Justin.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell this about 60 seconds. I'm going to part the Red Sea, and that's
Love
what's
it.
going to happen. Patrick Mahomes' wife, Brittany, has taken one political stance very publicly.
And Taylor Swift's
Swift has taken
publicly taking the other one.
Yes, very publicly. They did not sit together at the game on Sunday.
I knew that.
But
U.S. Open, though.
they all showed up to Patrick's birthday last night. They were all partying.
See, this is what and you just said that very well in about 40 seconds. I'm going to wrap this up in about 20, hopefully. And
Kelsey was there too.
This is what drives me nuts. Is like, okay, so the coworker's girlfriend and the coworker's wives aren't sitting next to each other, and we're supposed to take that as a political statement. Or maybe they're both rich and they have their own suite and they sit wherever they want. God,
Dude,
I've had enough of this election just pouring into my algorithms. I don't need it pouring into my football Sundays. All right. Coming up next.
That birthday party looked.
But it's like, oh, they didn't sit next to each other week 1. Is that a statement? Oh, they sat next to each other at the U.S. Open. Is that a statement? It's like, no.
Yeah, apparently
They're one's boyfriend, the other's husband play football together.
Apparently
they're not friends.
Most of the guests got to go in the photo booth with Taylor, Justin, and wouldn't that be pretty cool? Not gonna lie, if you invited him, it's like, hey, I'm gonna go get in this photo booth with a cool little hat and take some poses with Tay-Tay, man. Not bad.
You want a hot take? Don't like photo booths. Hot take, don't like them.
Doesn't surprise me.
Had one at the wedding, though. There were some inappropriate photos that were taken. Got all of them. I was like,
Is that why you don't like photo booths?
No, I just, I don't know if it's ever as good as they seem. Anyways, what is as good as it seems is wrapping up hour number 2 with some stuff we saw on the internet. We may dive in. Shake up at the top of the AP poll in college football. Next, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, time to wrap up hour number 2. This is where we do stuff we saw on the internet, and I don't know if Brenden, if your internet's the same as my internet, because algorithms and stuff. But in a run-of-the-mill non-conference win, Shedeur Sanders of Colorado Buffaloes managed to stay on the internet, and I don't know if it's my fault. I don't know if I am buying into it once again, but there was obviously, because of what happened last year with College Game Day, the hit on Travis Hunter. My mom taught me to take my hat off inside, and Deion Sanders said that Colorado State was talking about his mom vis-a-vis, and the whole thing that happened last year and the double overtime game, that obviously there was a lot of anticipation with this Colorado State game, and I'm sure it probably drew some pretty big numbers. First time that Colorado has traveled to Fort Collins since 1997, and it was supposed to be a beehive. It was supposed to be a hornet's nest that they were walking into. Colorado State's not very good. Now, Colorado's not very good either, but once again managed to have enough offensive firepower in the game to take down Colorado State. They're 2-1. But, of course, after the game, Shedeur Sanders was shown on camera not shaking hands with the Colorado State quarterback, who did, to be fair, talk an awful lot of smack, let's just say, on Colorado before the game. Now, I've always been, hey, you talk all you want. When you get your butt kicked, you get your butt kicked. And to Colorado State's credit, they got their butt kicked. Quarterback came up to Shedeur, went to go shake his head. Shedeur said, nope, I saw it. And, of course, and here we go again. Boy, if it's not one fire, it's another. So here, I have said I have maybe been guilty of being a Shedeur Sanders hater, potentially. Brenden, is there a quarterback in the country that could get away with what he gets away with without their dad as the head coach? Could you imagine if Quinn Ewers was doing that at Texas? Do you think Steve Sarkisian would maybe walk up and be like, yeah, Quinn, we're not going to do that. You're going to shake hands or you're going to get off the field. But once again, Colorado, in what should be an irrelevant franchise or irrelevant organization, irrelevant program, somehow, some way managed to make themselves relevant by, once again, feeding into the circus. Now, let's talk about some relevant teams. We have a shakeup at the top of the AP poll. Again, as I mentioned during the first segment of the program, way back at 6:15 in the morning, the AP poll is not relevant. It's for entertainment purposes only at this particular point. It is a marketing tool. Case in point, Tennessee's playing Oklahoma. You are going to see number 6 versus number 15. That's a fun marketing tool. But in a way of picking a national champion, the AP poll doesn't really matter anymore. There may be potentially, with regard to seeding, with regard to does the difference in the 8-9 game, which could be the difference in a home game or an away game, maybe potentially. But for the most part, especially in September, the AP poll doesn't matter, but it's for entertainment purposes only. So let's be entertaining. Brenden, Texas takes the top spot. They lose Quinn Ewers, but they don't have a problem. They beat the dog out of UTSA. They have the best win by far of anybody this season with the way that they went to Michigan and dismantled them. Georgia ends up in, pun intended, a dogfight with the Kentucky Wildcats, win by a point on the road. They get dropped a spot, and they're number 2, and Ohio State sticks right there at number 3. Alabama stays at 4. The only other movement, Tennessee moves up 1 to 6. I got no problem with Texas being the number 1 team in the country. I think Tennessee might be a top 5 team, but we'll find out this weekend. They're kind of in a prove-it game. You good with Georgia getting dropped to number 2 after that performance?
Yeah, that's fine. No issues with me there. Honestly, I think Oregon deserved to jump. I was surprised they didn't.
I think the reason why is because Miami and Tennessee, and Ole Miss for that matter, boy, they all looked really good. And again, if you're an Oregon fan, you sitting in the bye, Tennessee's playing Oklahoma. That might be somewhat significant. Who's Miami playing? Miami plays South Florida. That's a 17-point spread. Hurricanes are back, man.
Florida's making some noise, though.
South Florida? Where were they this weekend? Oh, that's right. They beat Southern Miss. And hung with Alabama for like a half, right? And then Alabama fans got all freaked out, and then Alabama went up to Wisconsin and beat their doors in.
Probably still a pretty comfortable win, but yeah, they've been decent this year.
All right. If you look at these three teams, let's eliminate Oregon, but let's look at these: Ole Miss, Tennessee, Miami. Brenden, who's for real? Who's for real? Of those three teams, who do you think has the best chance to win the national title? I know who I think, but of
Miami.
those three, really, I think it's Tennessee.
No, Miami's got top 5 running back in the country. They've got a top 10 quarterback in the country. They've got a great offensive line. They've got a solid defense. And they've got a coach who's out to have something to prove after kind of getting, for lack of better terms, I'll just say dumped on his first couple seasons. So,
I mean, he did some of it to himself. That Georgia Tech game.
But it's kind of a Mario revenge story. It's like, look at these Pac-12 pieces I got to lead the way.
It's true.
You know, Damin Martinez, Cam Ward, they're darn good players. They're going to lead them pretty far this year.
And they get the ACC. Meanwhile, Tennessee's got to play an SEC schedule with Oklahoma. Then they go to Arkansas. They get Alabama at home. And then they got to go to Georgia. We'll find out real soon if Tennessee is for real. But Ian Maliava, I love that guy. If you see him throw a deep ball, dude, fun to watch. All right. We've got a full third hour, including, Damian Priest is going to be in the building. He's at Monday Night Raw at Moda Center tonight. Hour 3 coming up next, 620 Rip City Radio.
8 a.m. on a Monday. Brenden Slaughter with you for Rip City Mornings. The Oregon Ducks cruise past Oregon State behind a big second half at Reser Stadium to take the rivalry 49-14. Oregon holds steady in the polls at number 9 as they have an off week before beginning Big Ten play at UCLA on the 28th. Oregon State, meanwhile, back in action this weekend against Purdue. And the Seattle Seahawks are 2-0 in the Mike McDonald era after a 23-20 overtime victory over the New England Patriots in Foxborough. Them Seahawks making some noise. Coming up in about half an hour here on the big show, we're going to have WWE's Damin Priest on the show. Justin going to live out some WWE childhood fun and much, much more. You got Hour 3 Rip City Mornings on a Monday.
Hey, welcome back to Rip City Mornings, everybody. Hopefully you are having a fantastic Monday. We're having a good time. As Brenden just mentioned in the update, Damin Priest, one half of the Terror Twins, is going to be joining us. We got Monday Night Raw at Moda Center tonight. So we're going to talk to Damin Priest about his beef after Brenden, he got kicked out of the Judgment Day. All right? They screwed him over at SummerSlam, and then he got kicked out of the Judgment Day with that dirty Dom Mysterio. So Damin Priest, he's now on his own. One half of the Terror Twins, him and Rhea Ripley. And they got Finn Balor in their sights. Plus, he's a big fan of wrestlers that I knew growing up, so kind of pumped to talk, as they say in my neck of the woods, Brenden, talk a little wrestling. Because in Douglas County, even though technically in Oregon we don't have accents, there's an accent in Douglas County, and there's wrestling, which is what the kids in high school do on the mats with the singlets and and the 2-point takedown and reversal, and then there's what the Undertaker used to do, and that's wrestling. Let's do a little wrestling. So, very excited to talk to Damin Priest coming up in approximately a half an hour. We do have an RCM mailbag as well. Obviously, a ton of talk about Civil War and the performance that Oregon put on display at Reser Stadium on Saturday against the Beavs. And I mean, again, this is where the rivalry is tough. This is where the rivalry is tough. It's September. Teams get better and sometimes get worse. For years, not years, decades, over a century. Not all of us are that old, but for decades, your season as an Oregon or an Oregon State fan was determined by this game. Through Brendan's entire life, through my entire life, through most of your entire life, if you grew up on one side or the other in this rivalry, which most of you did, even if you had a great season, you lose that game to Oregon State as an Oregon fan, it has an impact. Again, I go back to 2 years ago, right? Oregon, under first-year coach Dan Lanning, under first-year transfer in Bo Nix, wins the Holiday Bowl. I believe won 10 games. That is a success in every way, shape, or form. Oh, wait, they lost to Washington and they lost to Oregon State, and the way that they lost to Oregon State at Reese, that game had an impact because the last game of the year. It's the rivalry, everything else. We knew it was going to be different. We knew it was going to have a different feel to it, and I think maybe the biggest difference is that your success or failure on the season is not determined by this game. And I'm not saying the entire success or failure, but you have a really good season. Oregon State last year had a very good season. Brenden, fair to say top 5 season in Oregon State football history last year?
No,
I'm sorry, no. 2 years. I was thinking 2 years ago.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, 2 years ago.
Like last year, 8-5? No.
Sorry.
10-3, you bet.
But at one point last year, Oregon State was a top 10 team in the country. They were playing Washington at home in a driving rainstorm as a top 10 team in the country.
Rainstorm coming out of people, too.
Heard that, yeah.
Sorry. Couldn't help myself. I think of Washington. That image is just burned in my brain, Justin. So another game where DJU didn't show up. So maybe that was Florida State. Maybe should have looked.
Some other guy was making it rain though.
Florida State should have maybe looked at the film from those last 2 games of the season.
But again, last year Oregon State top 10 team in the country. How often does that ever happen in Oregon State football history? Maybe a dozen times. Top 10 team, but the performance they put on at Autzen. Now it also didn't help that Jonathan Smith was fueling up the jet. Maybe there at the Eugene airport. I don't know if he ever made it back to Corvallis, but you lose that game at Autzen, and just all of a sudden, now for both Oregon and Oregon, look, Oregon goes on, and if they don't at least play in the Big Ten championship, this season's not going to be a failure, but it's going to be a disappointment. It is. You beat Oregon State, but it's not going. If you don't get to Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game, it's going to be a bit of a disappointment. Oregon State, you win 7 more games this year, 8 more games this year, get to 9-3, 10-2, even with a pretty lopsided loss. That's where I think the magic, and we all knew it was going to be different, but I think that's where kind of the magic is lost, is that we are sitting here, and I would assume for Oregon State fans, feels catastrophic at the moment, but whole season ahead of you. Whole season ahead of you. And for Oregon, well, it feels good for a couple of reasons. One is you didn't show up flat again in week 3, as you did in weeks 1 and 2. But 2, I think most importantly, is close game against Boise is one thing. It's still a rivalry game. And the idea that Oregon State at Reser, what happened the last 2 times, there's that breeze you feel, that's the sigh of relief coming from Eugene after that game going, okay, all of our hopes and dreams still intact. But that's where I think the magic was lost a little bit in the game, is that, and I don't know, maybe it's a good thing for Oregon State, like we mentioned. Beavs still have their whole season ahead of them, and I don't know if it was the way that the game was going in the fourth quarter. I don't know if it was one of those things that happened at a 12:30 game. But Brenden, you were saying vibes were not high by mid-third quarter. That whatever energy. How was kickoff, by the way?
Kickoff was great. It was absolutely electric for about a moment, and then I think just it's the way I wrote about in my story, was like that. Credit to Oregon, because you want to find a way to take a crowd out of a game.
Mm-hmm.
Have 2 third downs the first half. Chainsaw never comes out. And when you do that, you just again, I sit here and it's like it's tough still not to be disgusted by the performance. It's like defensively. I mean, offensively you can take some positives, but even here 2 days later, I'm like, that's the defense you put out there at home? Like, I hope there was some soul searching this weekend from Oregon State, Justin, because even still, like, if Oregon State had played the play that's what I said. Like, you were flat out either out-schemed in this matchup or just didn't have the dudes, and it was so obvious. Because, again, the only time Oregon didn't score a touchdown is when they threw an incomplete pass at the goal line. Like, Oregon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you feel differently if Oregon, in either one of those games before, showed the firepower that we thought?
Oh, totally.
But it's the fact that they were flat in week 1, flat in week 2, and that of all the teams and of all the games, for them to finally bust out of whatever funk they were in weeks 1 and 2, that it was against Oregon State.
Right, and on paper, I thought Oregon State definitely had a better defense than Idaho, and I thought it comparable Boise State.
Well, and again,
nice job.
But Brenden, I think you go back and replay that Idaho game. It's not a 10-point game.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so at all. I think Oregon was complacent. I think they were vanilla. I think they were still figuring some things out. And I think you're going to see Oregon click a whole lot more, especially down at UCLA, their next game. And then you got a big one. Well, it's going to feel like a big one because it's going to be a Friday night against Michigan State coming up in about 3 weeks. So I'm not in any way, shape, or form sitting here going like, yep, done and done. Weeks 1 and 2 don't matter. No, cannot put those completely in the rearview mirror. But I do think you saw some things clicking. All right, let's get to some fun stuff with this rivalry. Sappington heard it from the Beaver Believers. Old Atticus heard it from the Beaver Believers. Had to know it was coming. I believe Mike Parker, whom I love and we have on the show, I believe said he's being booed potentially for his traitorous ways. Which, again, rivalries should be somewhat fun. Yeah, it's a bit of a bummer, but like nobody's harmed. It's a rivalry game. I was with a lot of Oregon homers and at my house, and I'm not going to name any names, but like they're really booing him. And I'm like, yeah, I'd be booing him too. He left. He's turncoat. In a sports way. He showed up, made some kicks. That was nice. Didn't miss an extra point this week. That was even better. You mentioned it was kind of electric. Did it feel like a rivalry game?
Early, but not as the game went along. Probably after the first quarter, it was gone.
Yeah.
I will say, though, lots of very nice and courteous Duck fans I ran into throughout that was solid. That was solid. I'll say that from what I saw.
I think maybe a couple of things. One is maybe the outcome, but also it's September. We haven't built up our winter aggression yet. You know what I mean? You and I, we've always talked about this. Like at a certain point, we get a little bit grumpy when it's dark outside. Do you think it was like September sunshine and a beautiful afternoon? It's like, yeah, let's get out there and play some football at Reeser. That sounds like a fun, good time. So Dylan Gabriel goes, I don't want to say it goes ballistic, but pretty close to going ballistic. Did he get back in the Heisman race? I saw over the weekend he's still in the top 3 in odds in terms of the Heisman race. I think he's by no means the favorite. I think the favorite is now Cam Ward. I think Ashton Genty, if he has Ashton Genty against, they play the Cougs next week, Boise State, or no, that's later on. Never mind. If Ashton Genty against the Cougs or against the Beavs has one of those performances, he's going to definitely stay in the mix. And obviously, Iamaleava playing against Oklahoma this weekend could definitely get in the mix. But
Boise State's got the fighting Barney Balls this weekend.
He's going to put up a lot of numbers.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for Barney.
I love Coach Barney. Coach Bruce Barnum, every time I've met him and I've talked to him, has been a delight.
I love Barney.
But
it'll be a tough one.
Ashton Genty's going to put it on him.
It's going to be tough.
He's going to be tough. Ashton Genty is going to put. So here's where I think Gabriel got himself back into the Heisman mix. The fact that they had the close games that they did against Boise and Idaho, Brenden, it wasn't because Gabriel had like 4 picks. Do you know what I mean? And he was still putting up numbers. And now you get back in and you look at his efficiency. You look at the numbers he was putting up, the touchdowns he is going to be scoring. It's going to come right back to that game on October 12th that we all kind of thought it was going to be. Now, I'm not saying that even with a win, and that's going to be a tough nut to crack. See, pun intended, against the Buckeyes. That's going to be a tough nut to crack on October 12th. But, like, even then, Cam Ward still might stay ahead of him because Cam Ward's going to be putting up tons and tons of numbers. But I think this game saved Dylan Gabriel's Heisman campaign. It's still there. There's still opportunities in front. I don't think if they would have had another close game, I think you might have had that one DOA. So while obviously disastrous loss for Oregon State, I think for Oregon, sigh of a relief, more of a stamp of approval that this is maybe the team. And I think Gabriel's Heisman campaign still hanging in there.
Right. And I think, true, you have to look at the disappointing loss because of what could potentially be out the door, too. And you mentioned it was true. Oregon State, how they lost in this game would matter late in the season. And now it looks back and it's a blowout.
Yeah, that's true.
It is what it is, but it's a blowout.
But, I mean, how they lose, though, I don't know if it depends on kind of what the outlook of the season. Now you got to kind of shift ideas and change the outlook. And I understand why there were some Beaver fans that thought, hey, maybe outside shot at the playoff. That's probably now out the window. But a lot of opportunity ahead. And I think you lose by 10, you lose by, 35. At the end of the day, you win 9 games. You go to an okay bowl game, and you can build because of the conference and everything. All right, coming up next, we are going to be talking to Damin Priest. That's right, Damin Priest is going to be at Moda Center tonight. Monday Night Raw. He joins us in studio coming up next, 620 Rip City Radio. All right. Hopefully, in just a handful of minutes, we're going to be talking to Damin Priest, WWE superstar. We got Monday Night Raw. Well, Monday Night Football is on tonight too, but we also have Monday Night Raw at Moda Center. So excited to talk to Damin Priest and talk a little old school wrestling, talk a little Undertaker, talk a little Razor Ramon. And get some thoughts of what it's like to be a WWE superstar in 2024. So that's going to be coming up in about 5 or 6 minutes here on the Big Show. Joining us live in studio. Did want to talk about this, and I don't know how we fix it. And I know at the very beginning of this show we have said, "Hey, no complaints without a solution, right? No criticism without a solution." And I don't know exactly how we fix this unless we do what I very much do not want to do, which is turning college football more and more like the NFL. But it wasn't just the one play at the end of the first half in Civil War, which even Beaver fans had to look at that play and be like, What are we doing with roughing the passer and targeting? There was a handful of plays in college football this weekend. There was a roughing the passer against UCLA that looked very suspect. There was a South Carolina interception return for a touchdown, and then when LSU's quarterback went to try to make a tackle, was blocked. Now, it was a blindside block, which they're trying to get rid of, but it wasn't egregious. 15-yard penalty. Took a touchdown off the board in a game where LSU won, I think, in the last 30 seconds of the game. Now, I don't know if LSU or South Carolina at the end of the day is going to be competing in the SEC and going to be a factor in Atlanta, but you think about making a bowl game, making a significant bowl game, the difference in money changing hands, and we have kind of been dancing around and skirting around the topic of college football officiating for years and years and years, right? We joked about it because, well, forever we lived in the Pac-12. And Brenden, we just have anticipated that the officiating is going to be bad, right? Pac-12 officiating was bad. It was because of bad leadership. It was because of from the top down. And then now you are seeing, well, maybe it wasn't just Pac-12 officials, because Big 12 officials and ACC officials, and you look at some of the calls that are being made, and here's I think two of the biggest problems. One, they continue to change and tweak and try to fix the targeting rule. I think targeting should be a penalty. I do not believe targeting should be an ejection. I think targeting should be a 15 yards. Treat it like an intentional foul in basketball or like a technical foul. You do one, you're on my targeting list. 15 yards, that's a significant penalty. You do it again, well, then we deal with the ejection and the suspension and everything that goes along with it. But in terms of the frequency they are calling targeting in college football, and with the punishment that goes along with it, it does not match up. And I think one of the problems is they continue to keep changing it over and over to where nobody quite knows what targeting is. We knew at first, like, no head-to-head contact, right? Don't lead with the crown of your helmet. Receivers and quarterbacks are going to be protected when they're in vulnerable positions. But now it's like, well, there's a target area on the thing, and we don't know what targeting is. And good news is you can go back and you can review it, and Oregon doesn't have a player suspended for the first half for the second half in Civil War. But the fact that you can't take away the roughing the passer call, again, doesn't make sense, because here's the other problem. The NFL, and like I said, I like my Saturday football different than my Sunday football, but in the NFL, there's a head of officials. They got a guy. Not only they got a guy, but they got a committee. They got a whole rules committee that in the offseason, they get together and they have got a head of officials, and they have one point person, one voice, one message. College football used to be regional, right? It used to be. Guess what? It's not anymore. But it used to be regional. Pac-12, you get a lot of pass interference calls. You know what I mean? You get a lot of pass interference calls in the old Pac-12. In the SEC, not so much. As they say down south, we're going to let the boys play. And you would see from conference to conference and from region to region the differences in the way that the games were officiated. Well, now that there is no more regionality in college football, we need a point person. I don't know how you do it. I don't know who appoints it, because this, again, is the problem, is that we have got multiple conferences run by multiple conference commissioners, run by multiple heads of officiating, and we've got now confusion. 2 bad calls in the Pac-12, or the old Pac-12. Gosh, I'm going to have to put a swear jar up. But 2 bad calls on the West Coast, in UCLA and Oregon. Bad call in South Carolina, LSU. There was a call in Georgia and Kentucky that looked very, very close in terms of, can you overturn this? Was this an incomplete pass, or was this an interception for a touchdown that may or may not have saw the number 1 team in the country go down? That's significant. That is significant. So again, I don't know how you do it without putting a point person out there. I don't know how you get the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC. And by the way, because what we saw on Saturday was Pac-12, Big Ten. You see Conference USA. You see some SEC games. You see some interconference games. That's the other problem we got here, is you get into the non-conference. It'd be so easy if just the 4 major conferences, we elect a committee. We each put 4 person on the committee. We create a chairman at the head of said committee, and boom, we got an officials committee. Well, you can't do that because the Conference USA needs a say. Big Pac-12 needs a say. The Sun Belt needs a say. And that turns out to be a lot of cooks in the kitchen.
It does.
But in 2 things, because as the Wu-Tang told us, cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar bills, y'all. 2 things. We talked about it last week with the NFL in week 1. Gambling has never been higher in college football, where Venmos of players are being found and Venmos are being requested. Gambling, never been higher. But the other thing is, with the college football playoff and the difference between a win, a loss, could be the difference in $20-some million for your conference. Whether or not the Big Ten gets 3 teams in, or 2 teams, or 4 teams, that kind of stuff matters. And if it ultimately comes down to a targeting call, because this is where targeting, I think, is the bigger deal. Yeah, okay, so there was an illegal blindside block, borderline in the South Carolina LSU game. I wanted South Carolina to win because I'm not the biggest Brian Kelly fan, so I was kind of like, what on earth are we doing? But the targeting, to me, is the biggest problem. Because let's just say you get a second half targeting, and it might not matter in, a 49 to 14 game. But what happens when you get suspended for the first half? Wisconsin and Alabama were playing in what was the biggest game of the weekend. Right? Wisconsin and Alabama were playing in the biggest game of the weekend. Now, it didn't turn out that way in terms of outcomes. Alabama still seems to be Alabama. But in terms of leading into it, the hype, all that stuff, Wisconsin and Alabama was the biggest draw of the week. Both those teams had a starting defensive linebacker not in the game because of targeting the week before. That stuff matters. And I'm not saying, well, first off, I am saying take away the suspension thing with the targeting because I hate it. But it feels to me like at the biggest level of college football that there is confusion with ACC officials, Big 12 officials, Pac 12 officials. And that was kind of cute back in the day. Like, oh, yeah. Brenden, you know this. You have a Pac-12 officiating crew in a bowl game. You're like, take the over, because there is going to be nothing but pass interference calls. You with those Big Ten schools and the SEC schools go to play into a bowl game. It's like, and we have a Pac-12 officiating crew. It's like, all right. You see Glasses Ref. Remember Glasses Ref? I wonder what that guy's doing.
Jay Strickers.
Was he a dentist?
I do not know.
I believe he was a dentist. Anyways, like you see old Glasses Ref, and you're like, yep, there's going to be a lot of penalties. This game's going to take 4 hours. There's going to be a lot of penalties. And it was tongue-in-cheek. But now that there's no more regionality because, again, Pac-12 teams adjusted to Pac-12 officiating. It wasn't always easy, but they did. Well, the Pac-12 doesn't exist. Well, in its current state. So the fact that you have got in the Big Ten teams from Maryland to Seattle to Eugene to Piscataway, and there's no more regional. And the Big 12 stretches from Salt Lake City to South Florida, from West Virginia to Tempe, Arizona, right? In the Big 12, right? There, Central Florida. Sorry, you gave me that look. Sorry, not South Florida. Central Florida. There's no more regionality anymore. So why not find, and again, does the college football playoff, this is what we have talked about multiple times, like who is going to be the one lone voice? Who is going to be the one person or entity? It doesn't have to be one person. We figured it out with the playoff. You put a committee together. And when you put a committee together, you can at least have one consistent message. But right now, nobody seems to know what targeting is. Is it reviewable? Sure, but the penalty stays. That doesn't make a lick of sense. And that's not just for the Oregon. Like, okay, glad didn't have a suspension, but if it wasn't targeting, how does a 15-yard penalty stay? Now, I have also been the guy that has banged the table like, we do not need to review everything, right? I don't know how many games I've been in or I've been watching, and you're just like, look, this is a 4-possession game. There's 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. We do not need to review if this was a catch or not. We can go with the call that's been made and move on. But with the amount of money that's at stake, with the when jobs are at stake, I say it all the time. Why are coaches crazy? Why are coaches paranoid? Why is it that from Dan Lanning to Trent Bray to Kyle Whittingham, nobody will tell you who's injured or who's not, and you'll find out why? Because if they think that they can get 1 ounce of an advantage, that gets you 1 extra win, and that win gets you to a bowl game, gets you to a championship game, saves your job. If you can get 1 ounce of an advantage on 1 possession that gets you some points on the board, Georgia needed it. Now, again, Kirby Smart's not getting fired anytime soon, but I'm sure there were some people in the SEC sweating it out a little bit, going like, is our number 1 team about ready to lose on the road to Kentucky? Does that cost us a chance at getting 3 or 4 teams into the playoff? That's $20-some million. And the fact that we don't have a college football commissioner of officials, we're still doing this whole every conference has got their own set, and we kind of know what targeting is, but we kind of don't. We got to fix it. But sadly, Sadly, the only way to fix it is to do what I hate doing. You got to make it like the NFL. You got to make it like the NFL. We don't need conference officials anymore. We need college football officials. The NCAA needs some stuff to do, Brenden. They're kind of bored. They need some stuff to do. Maybe the NCAA can put out NCAA officials, and you could have one voice, one message. Could maybe get some consistency, because that's something that we are missing. All right. We're missing some other stuff, but we're not going to worry about that. What we are going to worry about is wrapping up the big show. We have got the RCM mailbag. That is next, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, time to wrap up the big show. We do that the same way each and every day with the RCM mailbag. Random questions, any subject, any topic. Nothing is off limits, and I repeat, will not duck the tough questions. Let's get the Monday show wrapped up and open up the mailbag. Here we go.
All right, firing to the big mailbag today, Justin. We're going to start with something that I was 28 years old when I found out over this weekend.
Yeah.
Which
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, which Justin got a good. I opened this in an in-between commercial segment, and I go, "Do you want to laugh?" And Justin goes, "Oh, I always want to laugh." And I'll admit, this one actually got him to chuckle a little bit. So, Justin, I was 28 years old.
Which is how you were old right now.
When I realized that Hellmann's and Best Foods are the same company, but they produce a slightly different mayo.
Okay, I don't know if I've ever... First off, I do not have a refined enough palate to tell you that one mayonnaise tastes better than the other. Do you know what I mean? Like, mayonnaise on its own, which mayonnaise gets a bad rap. I'm a mayonnaise fan. But mayonnaise is meant to be mixed with stuff. You know what I mean? It's meant to be spread on a sandwich with some lettuce and some tomato, maybe some mustard on there as well. Like, the people that say that they can... Now, Miracle Whip, we're not talking about that.
No, I avoided that
has
specifically.
A tangy zip, that you can taste the difference. Mayonnaise, I do not believe you can taste it. It's like there are people that firmly believe, like, if they get a Moscow Mule, that they can taste the difference in vodka, and I say no, you can't. I think you are a liar. I will blind taste test you. I will blind taste test you right now. That if you got Smirnoff, Grey Goose, and Kettle One, you in a Moscow Mule.
Well, those are all pretty comparable. I'm talking like Kettle One versus Burnett's. Yeah, I could taste Burnett's, Justin. I feel pretty confident.
You think so?
If it was,
we may have to do.
I mean,
put it
I'd
on
be
the
down.
list of things to do after football season.
I would be down because, yeah, I mean, like Justin. I mean, you know, there are some bad memories with some bottom shelf Burnett's.
Now, I bet you will know it the next day.
Fair,
but what
fair.
what I'm saying is in the moment you get yourself a Moscow Mule with the ginger beer and the lime. I don't think you can taste the difference.
So let's
of the difference in vodka.
Yeah,
and that neither here nor there though. Point is, I don't believe people when they say they can taste the difference in mayonnaise. Whether it's the difference between Best Foods and Hellmann's, it's the same. It's the same mayonnaise. The same people make it. It's the same mayonnaise.
Here's where I will stop you. A quick Google, Justin. I fell into this rabbit hole yesterday. The recipes are different.
The recipes are
very subtly, but
what's the
Best
difference?
Foods uses slightly more sodium and potentially vinegar. And again, this is where the internet will say some people find that Best Foods is a little bit more tangy than Hellmann's.
Now, is that
I would
real, like, official statement from the company, or is that people believing things? Yeah, people believing things.
Okay. You know, for the most part, I mean, they have talked about how they say what their official website says is that the recipes are relatively close, but it gives them the wiggle room to probably have, and I think it's just kind of interesting because I don't really care. I've never really compared. I just think it's unique that one big company and you're like, if you're west of the Rockies, might be a little tangier. If you're east of the Rockies, might be a little more tart. I don't know. I just kind of like that.
But again, like I've had Best Foods, I've had Duke's, I've had Winco brand. I've had Best Western, or Western Family. Best Western's a hotel.
One more for you.
Western Family. I've had them all. You put them on a sandwich, I don't believe you can tell the difference.
Per their official website, Best Foods may contain more lemon juice, depending on the batch as well.
Depending on, yeah.
No, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Like I said, it was a random mayo rabbit hole I fell in,
I know.
Justin.
But it is
so
interesting
funny.
that it's the first time you had heard that, on the East Coast, it's Hellmann's.
No idea.
And then on the West Coast, it's Best Foods.
Well, and then you open my mind. Like, again, Justin, we have one kind of Heinz. My Heinz ketchup is coast to coast.
Yeah, buddy.
And you mentioned to me, you're like, here on the West Coast, we have Carl's Jr. The East Coast, it's Hardee's.
Yeah.
I mean, why, I guess? Why not have one brand consistently across America?
If you really like deep dive into it, and maybe you got something to do this afternoon because you don't want to go back and pay attention to the Civil War. I understand that.
I might carve out some free time.
But
yeah, it's true.
If
Maybe some video
you
games.
follow almost every brand of anything you can buy at the store, you can trace it back to like 3 companies.
Yes.
Like 3 companies own everything. So it's like, and you don't think they don't consolidate to save money? It's like, yeah, that's how you get, Hardee's on the East Coast. And it's like, do we really just want to change all the signs? No, we just keep it Hardee's. Are they going to sell the same stuff? Yep, we sure are. Sell the same stuff.
I just found it interesting because, you always heard the Miracle Whip mayo debate, and rightfully so, as people are very staunchly on both sides of that. But I'd never heard Best Foods and Hellman's, we're just going to have a little mini inside the mayo rivalry. Justin.
Which is fun. Like, there's the, and we've talked about this so much, like Coca-Cola tastes different at McDonald's because it just does. There are some people that believe, and I've never tried this out, but there are some people that believe that Budweiser or Bud Light, if you get it in St. Louis, that it tastes different because it's fresh, that's right out of the brewery, or that the Coors Light in Colorado tastes a little bit different. I don't know if I buy into it.
You buy that?
I don't know if I buy into it. I think it might just be a fun little game that everybody's playing, but I'd like to find out.
The old
I'd sure like to find out.
So you're saying it's a little better to have true Rocky Mountain water. Is what you're saying, Justin. In Golden, Colorado.
Yeah, I'll
with
bet
my
you
Sam Elliott voice.
They get out there with the bucket and just right out of the Colorado River.
It's a banquet beer, Justin. Got to get my Sam Elliott.
We've gone off the rails. We have gone off the rails. I lost my train of thought. Anyways, do we have another one?
Yeah, sure do.
I ruined it. I lost my train of thought.
No, you're good. Like I said, just had to ask that question because, I didn't think that mayo would be something that could still surprise me. Nevertheless, let's go ahead and fire it up, Justin. Up next on the mailbag. Yeah, this is a good one I like to ask every couple months. What's the weirdest thing in your fridge right now?
Oh.
Right now. And that would...
Cleaned out the fridge a lot yesterday because had a party.
Yeah. How was the party, by the way?
Party was awesome.
Yeah.
Party was awesome.
The entertainment was great, so it should have been awesome.
A game was awesome. Party went into the night. I would say weirdest thing. I have got some pickled jalapenos. Probably the weirdest thing in my fridge right now. Because I made a ranch dip for wings. And I threw some pickled jalapenos in the ranch dip. Buttermilk, mayonnaise, pickled jalapenos, and a little my own seasoning blend. It was pretty legit. But I have a bunch of leftover pickled jalapenos that are sitting in the fridge right now. That's probably the weirdest thing.
Pickled jalapenos.
Yeah, got some Kalamata olives that are probably way too old.
Yeah, but nothing.
Those are fair, but yeah, I cleaned out a lot of stuff. Because after the party, you're just like, all right, don't need that, don't need that, don't need that. I cleaned out a ton of stuff.
Yeah, so you had
some potatoes. Oh, can I tell you a real fun story in about 60 seconds?
We can close out with it, you bet.
We were going to, Kelly and I were going to the store, get some last minute stuff. Wanted to get one more side dish, decided potato salad. Want to go get some potato salad for the wings and the pasta salad. Kelly picks up a Reeser potato salad, and I go, put that down. Not today.
Makes sense.
Not today.
Makes
now,
sense.
Is Reeser the supreme potato salad? It sure is. But you know what? Today, we're going store brand.
I don't blame you. I don't. I respect the game. If
I was
anything.
like, of all the nope.
I respect the game.
Not today. And she eats it. She's like, ooh.
Yeah,
I
respect the game. Respect it. I would have gone. I would have gone into the deli and gotten
thought about it.
Because that, I think, is what they make there at the deli typically.
I got store brand, which is basically the deli stuff. They scoop it and they put it into a nice, convenient little thing.
But potato salad over mac salad. Interesting.
Yeah, well, we already had a pasta salad.
Oh, duh.
Had a pasta salad.
Pasta.
Don't want to double up on the carbs. All right. Carbs weren't a problem yesterday. All right, that's going to do it for the big show. Thanks to super producer Brenden. Thanks to all of you. Have a terrific Monday. We're back at it tomorrow morning, bright and early on 620 Rip City Radio.